In this video, I'll be talking about vulnerability. So what exactly is vulnerability, and why is it important to becoming successful with women and to forming connections? Well, the definition of vulnerability, which I'm going to be using for this video, comes from an author called Brené Brown. And basically what she says is that vulnerability is the choice to show up and let your true self be seen by other people. What I figured out is that vulnerability is what actually dissolves feelings of inferiority and shame and turns it into confidence. And you can only build connections with people by allowing yourself to be vulnerable, by making that choice to show up and let your true self be seen. So you have to share your true feelings and true personality with people instead of trying to hide them. And when it comes to forming a connection with her, your vulnerability is what's going to make the girl or the woman feel more comfortable to open up to you as well. If you remember back to Module 1, I talked for a bit about things like shame, insecurity, and inferiority. So I spent some time explaining to you how feelings of nervousness, shyness, these types of feelings are often caused by beliefs of shame and inferiority. See, it's only when you think that you have something about you, some type of defect that makes you unlovable or unworthy of acceptance, it's only then that you start to feel anxious or nervous or shy around people. See, you feel nervous because deep down you believe that they would reject you if they knew how you really were. I remember I shared a quote with you before that people who fear rejection often act as though they have some deep, dark secret that would mean instant loneliness if it were discovered. So here's two different ways that people who have shame or insecurities try to deal with them. The first strategy is what I call impression making. So if you feel insecure, if you feel like you're not good enough for people to like you, then you believe that you have to create a certain impression with the girl for her to like you. See, a lot of guys who are listening to this program, you probably believe that there's something about yourself. Maybe it's your looks, maybe it's your type of lifestyle, maybe it's something else. You have something about yourself that you have to hide in order to be attractive to a girl. So the way that you behave, it's almost like you're asking the question, how can I hide unattractive things about myself? So maybe it's because you don't drive a car, so you think you need to somehow trick a girl into liking you, and yet by hiding the fact that you don't drive a car. Maybe right now you don't have that many friends, or you don't have that big of a social life, so you think that if any girl found out about this, then she would instantly reject you. Another way that shame can cause you to try to form an impression on her is you may try to say what you think that she wants to hear. So for example, a lot of guys who are more shy or introverted, if they get a crush on a girl, they'll try to study her from a distance and try to find out her interests, her hobbies, what she likes, and then when you talk to her, you may try to pretend like you're into whatever she's into. Another way impression making happens is when you filter what you say. So for example, around your friends you may talk one way, and then when you're around an attractive girl you may talk a different way. And what that really comes down to is, again, insecurity. You don't think that she would like you if you talked the way that your personality naturally is, so you try to act differently to make her like you. And maybe that means that you don't speak up as often, or maybe that means that you try to hide your interest in her, or maybe that means that you don't joke around in the same way that you usually would, and so on and so forth. Now, another strategy for shame or insecurity that many people have is they simply hide away. They totally avoid sharing their real personality and feelings with people, and especially with girls that they're attracted to, so they don't make any real bonds or form any real connections. For example, I remember back when I was going to my first year of university, I still had a ton of shame about myself. I still had a ton of social anxiety, basically caused by all this shame, and I believe that I had all these things that I had to hide about myself, or else people would instantly reject me. And so for that first year of university, I basically didn't make any real friends. I just hid away in my room. I didn't talk to any of the other people who were living around me, and I was extremely secretive and withdrawn. I definitely didn't try to get out there and try to, meet some people, join any clubs, or talk to people, or invite people out to do things, or make any friends. And definitely I didn't try to talk to girls at all. I just hid away in my room most of the time. So those are two strategies. So impression making and hiding, those are two big strategies that people who feel shame or who feel insecurity or inferiority often use in order to avoid getting disapproval or avoid getting rejected. And what you need to understand is that when you're using these strategies, people can usually sense that you're trying to appear like something you're not. And if you're hiding, then they won't even get a chance to talk to you, right? So something like impression making basically communicates that you're very emotionally invested in how other people see you. And this is almost the very definition of neediness, which, if you remember back to Module 1, neediness is extremely unattractive. See, vulnerability is not just great for forming connections, it's actually very attractive, because a guy who is vulnerable is communicating that he's non-needy. If you remember back to Module 1, non-neediness means that you're putting your opinion of yourself over other people's opinion of you. You're not very emotionally invested in how they see you, and this communicates a lot of attractive qualities about you, like resourcefulness and status. See, the types of men that women find the most attractive are basically able to be an open book. They aren't afraid of sharing almost anything about themselves because they're comfortable with themselves. I remember I was watching an interview that a dating coach did with a woman, and what she said is that what's most attractive to her is when she meets a man who knows who he is. So what does that mean, a man who knows who he is? It's basically a man who shares his true self with people, and he knows that some people might like him and some people won't, and he's okay with it. See, that's really non-neediness. On the other hand, when you're trying to manipulate the way people see you through impression making or through hiding certain parts of yourself, that communicates a huge amount of emotional investment and putting other people's opinions upon a pedestal. So it's incredibly needy. Here's some mindsets that you should have if you want to be more vulnerable. You should think that people who don't like the real me, with all my flaws and shortcomings, aren't compatible with me anyway. So I'm saving us both time by being upfront. So for example, let's imagine that you're a more liberal guy and you're attracted to a girl who's very conservative and she's religious. Now, even though you're attracted to her, do you think that's really a girl that is compatible with you in the long run? Probably not. Even if you did manage to make her into your girlfriend, you would probably be miserable in the relationship because of the values mismatch. There's a cool quote that says, "Be who you are and say what you feel, because those who matter don't mind, and those who mind don't matter." See, when you're trying to hide things about yourself to make people or to make girls like you, or when you're trying to manipulate her perception of you in any way, shape, or form, that's going to cause you to feel a type of performance anxiety. You feel like you have to perform a certain way around her in order for her to keep liking you. On the other hand, when you're comfortable with yourself and you feel like the girl could like you just for you, so you don't feel afraid to, for example, share some kind of flaw that you have, or maybe you're not afraid to be more boring sometimes and not be entertaining all the time. When you're comfortable with yourself in that way, then you don't feel that anxiety, and your relationships are going to be a lot more healthy in the long run. So here's some practical tips and some practical things you can say in conversations in order to show vulnerability. First of all, it's important that you don't try to hide how you feel. Even if you're feeling a bit nervous or a bit awkward, you can actually share that with her. For example, a few weeks ago, I was in the shopping center and I was walking past the food court, and I saw a girl who I thought was very cute. So what I decided to do is I walked up to her and I started talking to her. And at the time, I was actually feeling kind of nervous because I'd basically been working on my computer all day, so I wasn't in a really social mood, so I was feeling a little bit nervous. And I noticed that I wasn't making that good of an eye contact when I was talking to her, so I was looking away too often. And she noticed that I was breaking eye contact a lot, and I was looking away from her. So she asked me a question like, did someone dare you to do this? And I decided to take the opportunity to be vulnerable. And I said, no, I'm looking away because I feel a bit nervous. And then I just continued talking to her and I continued the conversation. And see, by being vulnerable, it actually helped me to feel less nervous. Like I felt less nervous a couple minutes later. My eye contact improved, and I was able to have a good conversation with her. And at the end, I ended up getting her number. Sometimes it's not appropriate to share very deep emotions when you're first meeting somebody, but when you're in a relationship, or when you've been dating a girl for, a couple weeks, then being able to share how you feel is going to create quite a deep connection. Another way to be vulnerable is to act the same way when you're talking to the girl as you would act if you were talking to one of your close friends. So, for example, if you have some kind of goofy way of joking that you do when you're with your friends, then you shouldn't try to hide or censor that, because the girls who you're compatible with will probably like that goofy way of joking. And the girls who wouldn't, make a good girlfriend or a casual relationship are going to be turned off, and they should be turned off. Another way to be vulnerable is by sharing personal stories from your past. You can even share stories that are somewhat embarrassing. As an example of that, if you remember back a couple minutes ago in this presentation, I actually did this. I told you about how in my first year of university, I hid away and I was very secretive and withdrawn, and I had no friends. And when I made this admission, when I shared with you this personal story from my own past, you probably felt like you knew me quite a bit more than if I tried to hide that. You should also try to share your flaws or quirks more often. These are things about you that are different from the average. So for example, maybe you have some nerdy interest. Maybe you really like to play some kind of very nerdy video game. Maybe you like to build computers, or you like computer programming. Or maybe you're really interested in a certain type of book or a certain type of movie. Or maybe you're really into any other type of little niche interest. Another example of sharing a type of flaw or a personal story from your past is you could even tell her that when you meet people for the first time, you're often more shy and you can only open up when you know somebody for a little bit longer. Another example of a personal story is you could tell her about something you did, like maybe you quit smoking in the past, maybe you lost weight, maybe you were really struggling with some type of class and then you figured out how to turn it around. Maybe you had disagreements with your parents. See, these types of struggles and personal stories, these actually create points of connection with people. Even if the girl doesn't have the same flaws or quirks, or, if she hasn't had the same types of personal stories from her own past, she can still relate to the idea of having something different about you, about having some kind of quirk, about having some kind of personal story in the same theme as something that you shared. See, this isn't about being self-deprecating. This is more about learning to be comfortable with yourself and realizing that people will actually like you just for you. See, nobody relates to somebody who's perfect and flawless. So if you try to hide your flaws and you try to appear perfect, then you're not going to be able to create any type of connection. As an example, when comic books were first beginning, there were a lot of superheroes which were perfect. They had no weaknesses. And you know what happened to those perfect superheroes? They all died out because nobody could relate to them. On the other hand, the superheroes who had flaws, especially the ones who had some major flaws, those ones became popular because people could actually relate to them. So even the greatest superheroes like Superman and Batman and Spider-Man, they all have some kind of flaw that creates connection. Spider-Man and Superman, they have superpowers, but they're also incredibly bad with women. Spider-Man, he's bullied, he has issues with his work, with keeping his job. Batman has his dark past and, his whole family issues, and so on and so forth. So the more a superhero has flaws which are relatable to the average reader, the better of a character that they are. And the same thing happens in personal relationships. When you can be able to share things about yourself which make you into an imperfect person, that usually makes people like you more. So I hope that gave you a quick overview of vulnerability and how exactly you can start to share yourself more in conversations in order to overcome feelings like shame and inferiority, and to create healthy and lasting relationships. And keep in mind that vulnerability is attractive because it communicates non-neediness. Only a man who isn't too emotionally invested in a girl's opinion of him would feel comfortable sharing his true self with her, even with that risk of rejection. See, so a lot of people think vulnerability is weakness, but it's actually strength. It communicates that you don't care too much about her opinion of you. And usually that means that you have options and that you're high status. Vulnerability is also the only way that you can create and maintain a long-term relationship with a girlfriend. So you have to learn to slowly open up and share your true self with people. I know a lot of guys who are listening to this program have never had a real relationship before. They've never had a girlfriend before. So in order to create those relationships, you need to overcome impression making and hiding and learn to put yourself out there more and open up using vulnerability. In this video, I'm basically trying to change your whole mindset from how can I make her like me by appearing a certain way to the mindset of this is how I am. And if you don't like it, if she doesn't like it, then there's some other girl out there who will. Basically, when you're needy and when you feel insecure, it's almost like you're trying to sell yourself to people. And when you feel comfortable with yourself and you're okay being vulnerable, then you're not trying to sell yourself to people. Instead, it's almost like you're the buyer, and when you meet a girl, you're not thinking, how do I make her like me? You're thinking, okay, you're cute, I like you because you're attractive, but is there anything else to you? Is there anything more to your personality besides looks? For me, when I implemented this mindset, before it felt like other people were filtering me, and I was trying to, pass through other people's filters to make them like me. And then, after I implemented this mindset of vulnerability, it's almost like that filter switched. And now, instead of me trying to make it through other people's filters, it's like I'm trying to filter other people, and I'm trying to figure out if other people would contribute to my own life. This is a much more psychologically healthy mindset to have. It's much more attractive. In the long run, it's going to allow you to overcome a lot of your fear of rejection. And it'll take away a lot of the performance anxiety that you now feel when you're talking to girls. See, a lot of your nervousness comes from thinking that you need to hide things about yourself to make her like you. So when you can alter your mindset and when you can practice being vulnerable and you realize that people aren't gonna reject you most of the time when you're expressing your true self and your true past and your true feelings, your anxiety will slowly go down over time. So I hope this video gave you a good overview of how vulnerability is attractive and how it can make connections. And I definitely recommend that you go back to Module 1 and you rewatch the videos on insecurity, inferiority, and non-neediness if you want to hammer these healthy mindsets even deeper into your psychology.